শুভ সন্ধ্যা সবাইকে আমন্ত্রণ জানাচ্ছি আজকের আলাপচারিতায়। আজকের আলাপচারিতায় আমরা বিষয় হিসেবে বেছে নিয়েছি জলবায়ু পরিবর্তনের প্রভাব। আজকে 1 নভেম্বর 2021। আমরা জানি যে পৃথিবীর প্রায় 100 জন ওয়ার্ল্ড লিডার্স তারা COP26 সামিটে মিলিত হয়েছেন স্কটল্যান্ডে, এবং এই সামিটটি we can actually describe this summit being the most critical summit of our lifetime, which will actually shape our collective future. পৃথিবীর ভবিষ্যৎ কোন দিকে ধাবিত হবে আজকে 1 নভেম্বর 2021-এ সেটা হয়তো নির্ধারিত হতে যাচ্ছে। এবং আজকের এই অর্থাৎ 2021 সালের এই ক্লাইমেট সামিট বা জলবায়ু পরিবর্তন নিয়ে পৃথিবীর স্থানীয় নেতৃবৃন্দ মিলিত হয়েছেন, কারণ এখনই জলবায়ু পরিবর্তনের প্রভাব সম্পর্কে যে সমস্ত কঠিন সিদ্ধান্ত নেওয়া প্রয়োজন সেটা নিতে হবে, এবং এই সিদ্ধান্তে উপনীত হবার জন্য পৃথিবীর বিশ্ব নেতৃবৃন্দ এই মুহূর্তে রয়েছেন স্কটল্যান্ডে। এবং এই জলবায়ু পরিবর্তন নিয়ে আমাদের আজকে আলোচনা। এই কঠিন বিষয়টিকে আমরা চেষ্টা করব আমাদের দর্শকদের জন্য সহজ করে বুঝিয়ে আমাদের সম্মুখে উপস্থাপন করবার জন্য, যাতে করে আমরা এই জলবায়ু পরিবর্তনের প্রভাব, দ্য ইম্প্যাক্ট অফ ক্লাইমেট চ্যালেঞ্জ বুঝতে পারি, এবং আমরা আমাদের যার যার অবস্থান থেকে এই জলবায়ু পরিবর্তনে আমরা কি ধরনের প্রভাব ফেলতে পারি, আমরা কি ধরনের পরিবর্তন আমাদের নিজেদের জীবনযাত্রায় আনতে পারি, সে বিষয়ে আমাদের প্যানেল অফ এক্সপার্টস আজকে কথা বলবেন। সো ফার্দার ডিলে আমি আমার প্যানেল মেম্বারদেরকে পরিচয় করিয়ে দিয়ে আলোচনা শুরু করতে চাই। রয়েছেন আমার সঙ্গে ভার্চুয়ালি জনাব আবদাল উল্লাহ, কর্ণধার BBPI এবং ফ্রিডম 50। ধন্যবাদ আবদাল ভাই আমাদেরকে সময় দেওয়ার জন্য এবং আমাদের সঙ্গে প্যানেলে যুক্ত হওয়ার জন্য।
ধন্যবাদ, থ্যাংক ইউ সো মাচ।
Then we have Jebi Rahman. She is from Climate Group, Head of Transparency and Pathways. Jebi is actually talking to us directly from COP26. Jebi, welcome to the show.
Dhanyavad, thank you very much.
And then at the studio with me is Mr. Tauhid Pasha, Head of Office, UN Migration Agency, IOM, UN. ধন্যবাদ পাশা ভাই আমাদেরকে সময় দেওয়ার জন্য এবং স্টুডিওতে আসবার জন্য।
My pleasure, Urmee.
So I'll start with Abdal bhai, with you. As I was describing that this summit, this COP26 2021 is possibly one of the most critical summit for us. And in this summit, BBPI has done a wonderful, tremendous job by showing or sending a letter to the Prime Minister of Bangladesh, outlining the concerns, outlining the support, and outlining the solutions to some extent in terms of how we can address these issues, especially for Bangladesh. So I would like to start with you, Abdal bhai, that what exactly is it that BBPI has put in this letter, Freedom 50, and the number of distinguished people of United Kingdom have actually signed this letter outlining or sharing the concerns, sharing the strengths of how Bangladesh is challenging and Bangladesh is actually addressing this climate challenge issue. So I'll start with you. Give us the context, please, Abdal bhai.
Good evening, assalamu alaikum. Bishesh dhanyabad Urmee apa. It's always a pleasure to be on your show.
We can't hear you at the moment, so yes, we can hear you. Thank you. Abdal bhai, I think you need to unmute yourself.
Okay, after all these years, can you hear me now?
We can.
Okay, excellent. Let me start again. Assalamu alaikum. Dhanyabad apnake Urmee apa এবং ATN Bangla for allowing myself and my colleagues to come on your show. First of all, apologies for not coming into the studios. For those who are familiar with me, you'll see I've got a small medical reason on my eye. But let me start off by saying that as we, British Bangladesh community, are celebrating 50th anniversary of Bangladesh, BBPI with some amazing friends, we set up a collective called Freedom 50 that is going to showcase the rich, diverse of British Bangladeshi culture. But we've been having great fun. And if we look outside on your studio, you'll see the amazing London Eye, which we took pride in lighting up red and green, and various other activities that we have done to showcase the rich culture of Bangladesh. But in doing that, one of the things that we've been most concerned about is for us as a Bangladeshi community, the British Bangladeshi diaspora, for our children and our children's children to celebrate the centenary, 100 years of Bangladesh. We feel that that may never come true because of the devastating effect of global warming. Now, we've done this letter, as you said, very collectively put together by my friends and colleagues and some esteemed global scientists. Our call today on this special occasion of COP26 to Sheikh Hasina, the Prime Minister of Bangladesh, that our father's generation and our elders in Britain in 1971 were galvanized by that famous speech by Sheikh Mujib on 7th of March. And ওই স্পিচটা শুনে আমাদের বাবার জেনারেশন কেউ দেশে গিয়ে মুক্তি করছেন, some became freedom fighters, কেউ এই দেশটাকে পয়সা দিয়ে মিছিল করছেন, ডেমনস্ট্রেশন করছেন, বিভিন্ন পত্রিকা, বিভিন্ন পার্লামেন্টারিয়ান পিটার শোর ওরার সাথে গিয়ে ক্যাম্পেইন করে আমাদের দেশের জন্য ফ্রিডম, মানে they campaign for freedom. So এখন আমরা, this generation of British Bangladeshi, after 50 years, it is our responsibility that we do something. And for that reason, the Freedom 50 Collective, we have written an open letter to the Honorable Prime Minister of Bangladesh, praising, first of all the effort that Bangladesh as a government, under the leadership of Sheikh Hasina, that they've done to tackle climate change. But we've put together a 7-action point demand, which my colleagues will talk further. But effectively, what we're saying in 1971, Bangabandhu, father of the nation, united the Bangla-speaking community to liberate Bangladesh. And আমাদের demand এখন যে Sheikh Hasina, the daughter of the father of the nation, the current Prime Minister and her government, call on the Bangla-speaking people once again to unite to fight a new war. And that war, এই যুদ্ধ, is climate change. So it is now Save Bangladesh. And on behalf of BB COP26, আমরা আজকে শুরু করছি একটা open letter আমাদের 50 prominent British Bangladeshi, and I'm really fortunate, Urmee Appa, that you have also given your support to this letter, and some of our most known people, personalities over the years of 10 years of BB Power, that we've gone to them to ask them to support this letter. But it is not just those 50. We're inviting everybody of British Bangladeshi and non-British Bangladeshi to support this letter on a change.com campaign, which we have launched today on social media. So anyone watching at home, anybody, letter সাথে জড়িত হতে পারবেন.
And Abdal bhai, I understand this letter will be presented to our Prime Minister tomorrow by our Scottish MP.
Thank you, Appa. Yes, so the letter is in a paper form. The online version is available for everyone to sign, but the 50 prominent British Bangladeshi who have signed, who have given their backing to this letter, we are very fortunate that the only British Bangladeshi member of Scottish Parliament, Faisal Chowdhury MBE, will be hand-delivering a letter inside the Scottish Parliament when the Honourable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina goes to visit the Scottish Parliament tomorrow. So on behalf of the Freedom 50 COP26 committee, he has very generously given the assurance that he will be giving the letter over to the Prime Minister. But this letter has also been supported by two of the most prominent people on the Bangladesh team, Professor Dr. Salimul Haq, one of the 20 most leading global scientists on climate change, and also supported by Professor Tasnim Siddiqui, who is leading the Bangladeshi delegation to COP26. And my friends, my colleague Jebi and Tauhid will talk further about all the areas.
Thank you, Abdal bhai. Stay with us. Jebi, I want to come to you, Jebi Rahman. Actually, we are really glad to have you on the show. You're talking to us directly, straight from COP26 environment, COP26 platform. So how exactly is the environment, Jebi, in COP26 in Glasgow?
Yeah, it's absolutely buzzing. I'm in the Climate Action Hub. It's obviously a little quieter now because we're late in the evening. But it's funny, I've been talking to people and there's been a few people that have been here already and they're quite tired, but it just goes to show how much effort goes into this. And people are just working tirelessly, and it's something I've noticed in other COPs as well. The delegates especially, that some of them don't sleep at night to achieve things like the Paris Agreement. So it's quite incredible sort of watching all these people working from around the world, working very hard. So it's an exciting place to be.
And obviously, as you're saying, this is possibly a very complex environment because I mean, it's possibly very difficult for us to even imagine how the environment is in terms of 100+ leaders in an environment, in a platform, and 100+ very, very important, very, very powerful leaders. And everybody has got their own agenda. But I think all of them have come together under this one particular agenda, climate challenge, and I'm sure they want to do something different for their countries at the same time for the world. So is it actually evidenced towards across the whole platform today that everybody is very, very committed to show that they really want to do something different for the world?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, this is COP26, so it's the 26th COP. They hold them annually, but due to COVID, we've had a 1-year gap. So the first time this started was in 1995. There was an Earth Summit in 1992, after which the UN framework for climate change was set up. And I think it's this recognition that this is a global issue, and you can you can have emissions, greenhouse gas emissions in your own country, in your own sort of different sectors, but it ultimately affects the world because the impacts, it doesn't just concern your country, it concerns the world. So that's why global leaders really need to connect on this issue and come to a global agreement, which is why the Paris Agreement was so important. I think what's challenging with Glasgow is that we've come 5 years since Paris, and the idea was that all of the leaders come with increased ambition. And you may have seen the news, even Boris Johnson was telling the G20 leaders off that the pledges aren't sort of ambitious enough and they need to be more ambitious.
Okay, I'll come to that. I'll come to that in terms of what has happened since the Paris Summit, whether leaders, the commitments that they have put in Paris Summit, whether that has been fulfilled, and if not, why not? So I'll put that question to you, but I would like to come to you, Pasha Bhai, Tauhid Pasha. Pasha Bhai, I mean, we are calling it, the world is calling it a climate emergency. So visually, usually, we have seen COVID-19, that was people are dying right, left, and center across the world. So people can understand why we're calling it as a crisis. When we are calling it a climate crisis or climate emergency, why is it that we are actually calling it a climate crisis or emergency? I mean, is it that people are feeling alarmed, or should we actually consider it as an emergency?
Thank you very much, Urmee. This is a really important topic, and yes, it is a climate emergency. আপনি যদি চিন্তা করেন আগামী 50 বছরের ভিতরে আমরা যদি কিছু না করি আপনার গ্লোবাল টেম্পারেচার 2.5 ডিগ্রি উঠে যাবে এটার মানে যে the south pole and the north pole বরফগুলো গলে যেয়ে আপনার sea level উঠে যাবে sea level উঠলে you will have millions of displaced people around the world আপনি যদি বাংলাদেশের কথা যদি চিন্তা করেন 10% of the land is subject to coastal erosion. এটার মানে আপনার 13 মিলিয়ন মানুষ তাদের বসবাসী চলে যাবে তাদের বাসাটা চলে যাবে
অর্থাৎ আমাদের কক্সবাজার এবং আমাদের বরিশাল ও বঙ্গোপসাগরের আশেপাশের অঞ্চলগুলো সমস্ত পানির নিচে
জি একদম আর আপনার সুন্দরবন one of the most is the largest mangrove swamp in the world. This is a natural wall and a natural barrier that prevents climate change. It prevents salinization. আপনার যদি ওই সুন্দরবন যদি চলেও যায় তাহলে আপনার clean water পানিও চলে যাবে and salinization means people will lose their livelihood. So আপনার অ্যাকশন এখনই নিতে হবে আর এখন যে ক্লাইমেট চেঞ্জের যে কনফারেন্স চলতেছে আপনার ওয়ার্ল্ড লিডারদেরকে রিকোয়েস্ট করা হচ্ছে টু লিমিট global temperature rises by 1.5 degrees. This 1.5 degrees, still it will mean that climate change is going to affect millions, kintu it will save the livelihoods of a lot of people. Eta khali Bangladesher bishoy na. This is a problem for the UK, this is a problem for the US, this is a problem for Australia. You've seen what's happened in Germany with the floods. Holland is another country similar to Bangladesh where climate change is affecting a low-lying country.
We are seeing in UK আজকে সারা দিন মানে পুরো এখন নভেম্বর থেকে আমরা সারা দিন বৃষ্টি দেখতে পাচ্ছি এবং মোটামুটি সূর্যের দেখা আজকাল আর মেলেই না
জি একদম and we're lucky in the UK because আপনার কয়েক বছর আগে more than 20 years ago আপনার Thames barrier ওঠা হয়েছে to prevent the Thames from flooding London. It costs a lot of money. Now the world needs to get together and they need to pledge to countries like Bangladesh that they will put the money in and they will make the investment to prevent the most damaging effects of climate change.
Abdal bhai, I want to come to you. We know je, especially in relation to the COP 50 Freedom 50 letter, there's a significant kind of detailed mention about how Bangladesh has been addressing this issue, actually being a victim of this situation because the more developed countries are actually creating this gas. Their industries are more or less dominantly responsible for this situation in terms of rising temperature, global warming and so on and so forth. Bangladesh and countries like Bangladesh are more or less victim. So, but amra jani je Bangladesh is actually trying their best, its best to address this issue in the global platform. So, apnar kache jante chaibo je how do we feel about how Bangladesh is trying to address this issue so far? Abdal bhai apnake unmute korte hobe.
The 7-point demand in the letter it's not just a demand to do more. It's also to praise Bangladesh in the efforts of the government as Prime Minister Hasina has been leading the 50 most vulnerable nations group. She's the president of that. So that shows that she's leading from the front, both in Bangladesh, but also in that 50 of the most vulnerable nation. She's the president of that particular group. So this shows that the effort by both internal government, the communities, the civil society in Bangladesh to address climate change, to address issues affecting global warming in Bangladesh. And I'm happy to ask Jebi to come in here because she has a wider understanding both from her time in working with BRAC in Bangladesh. She can give you far more hands-on experience if Jebi is able to come in at the moment.
Jebi, can you hear us? Jebi Rahman, have we lost you? Okay, so Jebi, yeah.
Can you hear me okay?
We can, yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, no, just to say, I've been working in international development for about 15 years. And as Abdal says, I started my career at BRAC in the UK, but I was very lucky. I met with many of the colleagues in Bangladesh. And especially one colleague sort of springs to mind. Unfortunately, he's deceased now. But Baba Kabir was responsible for the climate change department, and he really inspired me. And I think, as Abdal said, the government has had efforts, but in Bangladesh we've had huge efforts from NGOs and NGOs such as BRAC, who I understand are part of the Bangladesh delegation as advisors. Because previously, so many people used to die from, these cyclones. And if I think about NGOs like BRAC, and there are many others as well, they've developed all sorts of systems like early warning systems, telling people that getting better at predicting these cyclones and so forth, and warning people, having shelters as well. So there's a lot that the Bangladeshi government does, and it's quite interesting because we talked about the recent floods in Germany. and leading scientists like Salim ul-Haq will sort of say, actually, Bangladesh, we can teach you a lot about adaptation. And what Bangladesh brings to these negotiations is adaptation, resilience, and loss and damage. And I'll get
Jebi,
Tauhid
we will come to you. I think on that note, we will have to take a break and we will come back and would like to hear a bit more about adaptation and resilience and so on. So stay tuned with us. We will be back after a short break. দর্শক ছোট বিজ্ঞাপন বিরতির পর ফিরে আসছি, আমাদের সঙ্গে থাকুন। শুভ সন্ধ্যা। যারা এইমাত্র আমাদের আজকের আলাপচারিতার সঙ্গে যোগ দিলেন, আমরা কথা বলছি ক্লাইমেট চেঞ্জ বা জলবায়ু পরিবর্তনের প্রভাব নিয়ে। আমাদের সঙ্গে রয়েছেন virtually Abdal from BBPI, রয়েছেন Jebi Rahman from Climate Group. She has joined us directly from COP26 Summit, Glasgow. এবং আমাদের সঙ্গে স্টুডিওতে রয়েছেন Tauhid Pasha, Head of Office, UN Migration Agency. আমরা কথা বলছিলাম বিজ্ঞাপন বিরতিতে যাবার আগে with Jebi Rahman. Jebi, you are explaining to us in terms of how Bangladesh is doing in terms of addressing this issue, and what we also understand that Bangladesh, possibly one of the pioneer countries, being a victim, but has taken a very positive steps and very strong and bold steps in terms of addressing this issue. I would like to now ask you, Jebi, in terms of, obviously we are calling it as a climate crisis, climate emergency, and we understand that some of the reasons for this climate crisis being, rising carbon emission or global warming and number of other energy issues, things like that. So would you be able to say for our viewers, what are the main reasons that we need to be worried about in terms of addressing this climate emergency?
Thank you. And I think we've heard about some of the extreme weather events we've experienced this year. We've seen wildfires in California, Australia. We've seen the flooding across Europe, particularly Germany. So when you think of Bangladesh, you think Bangladesh has always had floods. It's a low-lying country. It's vulnerable to these issues. The thing is, climate change is happening right now, and it increases the intensity of those floods, and it increases the frequency of those floods. So these are the two things we really need to bear in mind. And I think Salim al-Haq explained it really well when I went to an event a few years ago, where he said a flood that would happen every 20 years is now happening every 5 years. Now, I was very young in 1988 when I saw the floods. It was my first visit to Bangladesh, and it left a lasting impression in my mind. And what we're talking about is floods that are far worse. And I think what Bangladesh is particularly vulnerable about is sea level rise. Already when you fly across Bangladesh, you see much of the country is underwater at certain parts of the year. And with climate change, this situation just kind of gets worse. Today, I heard the leader from the Maldives talk about how vulnerable his country is. And Bangladesh is in a very similar position. And it was the climate vulnerable countries that asked for the 1.5 limit to be put in the Paris Agreement, because we talked about the industrialized countries, and for them they wanted the 2 degrees Celsius limit. But really important for these low-lying and island countries to have the 1.5 limit, because every fraction of a degree
Sorry,
matters.
Jebi, can I stop you for there? Because obviously, in terms of, as you're saying, to address these issues, we need to look at maybe reducing the carbon emission, or using electric energy, and reducing the amount of usage of coal in terms of use, in the industry. But I understand that Bangladesh is still using coal for number of industries. And do you actually see that there is a reduction of usage of coal in Bangladesh?
Developing countries like India included, said the West has developed because they've been able to burn these fossil fuels and develop their industries. And that was their argument. But now even developing countries are coming to a recognition that we really cannot burn any more fossil fuels. I went to a conference this morning and it was all about phasing out coal. And I understand that Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina today in her speech said that they've actually cancelled some of the coal plants that they were planning. So these are positive steps. I've also picked up this leaflet from the Bangladesh Pavilion, and it talks about some of the initiatives over the last few years in renewable energy, such as solar power. So it's very difficult because obviously you want to develop the country, but I think leaders in these developing countries also starting to understand that it's not going to work with fossil fuels. We also need to kind of leapfrog ahead into the renewable energy sector.
I'll come to you. I'll come to Tauhid Bhai. So in terms of these very challenging targets that we are hearing, bringing down the temperature 2 degrees, it may sound very easy, bringing down the temperature 2 degrees, but bringing down the world temperature 2 degrees is a massive challenge. And if we believe that only the governments across the world will be responsible for it, is it actually fair? Or what exactly we as individuals can contribute?
The governments all have a responsibility to take leadership. As you said, আমাদের আজকের গ্লাসগোতে 100টার বেশি লিডার উপস্থিত হয়েছে। 190 countries nearly are represented at the conference, 25,000 delegates. কিন্তু তাদের হাতে খালি এটা না। We as people can take action in our very own homes. The British Bangladeshi community, we're 600,000 strong. আমরা যদি নিজেরা অ্যাকশন যদি নিতে পারি, we can make a positive effect on Bangladesh. আপনি যদি ধরেন আমরা প্রত্যেক বছর $2 billion আমরা পাঠাই বাংলাদেশে, just from the UK. আমরা যে পরিমাণ ইনভেস্টমেন্ট করি বাংলাদেশে, ওই যদি ইনভেস্টমেন্ট আমরা গ্রিন টেকনোলজির মধ্যে ইনভেস্টমেন্ট যদি করতে পারি, আমরা যদি প্লাস্টিক পলিউশন রিডিউস করতে পারি, আমরা যদি গ্রিন এনার্জির মধ্যে ইনভেস্ট করতে পারি, এতে কত ভালো হবে। আর এই দেশে আমরা নিজেদের লাইফস্টাইলের ভিতরে আমরা যদি একটু অ্যামেন্ড করতে পারি, ধরেন এই বছর
একটু থামাচ্ছি তৌহিদ ভাই, বিকজ আমরা অবভিয়াসলি ইটস এ ইম্পর্টেন্ট পয়েন্ট আপনি রেজ করেছেন। আমি আবদাল ভাইয়ের কাছেও জানতে চাইবো যে আমরা কিন্তু আমরা বাংলাদেশের এই দেশ থেকে যারা বা বিদেশ থেকে, শুধু এই দেশ না, বিদেশ থেকে যারা রেমিটেন্স পাঠায়, দ্যাট ইজ ওয়ান অফ দ্য রিজন অর কন্ট্রিবিউটরি ফ্যাক্টর টুয়ার্ডস আওয়ার জিডিপি বিং সো হাই অ্যান্ড জিডিপি বিং সো স্টেবল অ্যান্ড কনসিস্টেন্ট। কিন্তু আমরা দেখি যেটা বেশিরভাগ অর্থই কিন্তু অলস অর্থ, আইডল মানি বসে থাকে আমাদের ব্যাংকে, অথবা আমরা একটা বিরাট বড় প্রাসাদের মতন বাড়ি তৈরি করি। সো হোয়াট আর দ্য অ্যাকচুয়ালি অল্টারনেটিভস ইনস্টেড অফ মেকিং এ প্যালেস দ্যাট রিমেইনস এমটি? আমাদের we should think about investing on green energy. আমরা বলি always green energy, green investment, but আমাদের দর্শকদের জন্য যদি একটু বুঝিয়ে বলেন যে what exactly is green investment or green energy?
The Bangladeshi community in the UK is extremely talented. We have the technology, we have the know-how, we have the scientists, we have people like Jebi who are sitting there in Glasgow. They know how to fight climate change. আমরা যদি এইভাবে ইনভেস্ট করি বাংলাদেশের ভিতরে, this is both sustainable for the future and it will help Bangladesh prosper as well in the long run. আপনি যদি দেখেন
বাংলাদেশে ইনভেস্টমেন্টের জন্য অনেক ইনসেন্টিভ আছে এখন আমরা জানি।
জি,
আমাদের দর্শকদের জন্য সেটা ইম্পর্টেন্ট জানা।
জি, বাংলাদেশ গভর্নমেন্ট খুব ভালো ফ্যাসিলিটিস করছে আমাদের ইনভেস্টমেন্টের জন্য, and they are making it easy for the British Bangladeshi community and the other communities to invest. আপনি যদি দেখেন আমার বাড়ির কথা যদি দেখেন বাংলাদেশের জামালপুরের কাছে, আপনার নদীর তীর ভাঙতেছে। More than 1 million people live on the edge of rivers, and riverbank erosion is going to make them homeless. And this is a serious problem right now. And these are people whose livelihoods are going. So আমরা যদি কমিউনিটি হিসাবে যদি অ্যাকশন যদি না নেয় আজকে, তা আপনি দেখবেন যে 50 বছর পরে আমরা যে 100 বছরের স্বাধীনতা যে করতে চাবো বাংলাদেশে, we won't even be able to do that properly. So I think the time to act is now. কিন্তু আমাদের, we can do something about it. We can change our own lifestyles for a start, and we can change and affect how industry develops in Bangladesh as well.
আমাদের নিজেদের লাইফ আমরা কি করে পরিবর্তন করব?
এই বছর আমরা 50 বছর স্বাধীনতা সেলিব্রেট করছি। জুন মাসে the Freedom 50 collective that Abdal bhai mentioned, আমরা একত্র হয়ে we cycled from Oldham to London to create awareness of climate change. That was a 250-mile bike ride. A lot of people joined us on that ride. A lot of British Bangladeshi people joined us. Next year, we're going to do the same to Holland. We have to create awareness. আমরা যদি নিজেরা একটু গাড়ি একটু কম চালাই, আমরা যদি একটু বেশি হাঁটি, আমাদের নিজেদের হেলথের জন্য ভালো হবে। If we reduce the amount of plastics that we consume, এটাও পৃথিবীর জন্য ভালো হবে. So we can take action, and by taking that action, not only is it improving our own health, but it's improving our environment as well. So let's remember the power of this community in the UK. We're more than 600,000 strong. We invest a lot in Bangladesh. There is something that we can do about it. We can create that awareness with our own government in the UK, the British government, and we can help invest in Bangladesh as well.
Abdal bhai, আপনার কাছে আসতে চাচ্ছি, আমাদের কমিউনিটিকে how can we actually encourage and support our community to consider invest on green energy or green investment in Bangladesh? যেটা তাওহিদ ভাই বলছিলেন যে আমাদের we send money every year, every day, every month, and actually Bangladesh, as I was saying, Bangladesh GDPR of Bangladesh actually gets impacted significantly in a very positive way with the foreign currency. So how can we actually support British Bangladeshis to consider green investment?
Thank you, আপা। যেটা তৌহিদ ভাই যেটা বলছেন যে আমরা অবশ্য গ্লোবালি চিন্তা করতে হবে, তবে অ্যাক্ট করতে হবে লোকালি। আমি এক দুইটা প্র্যাকটিক্যাল জিনিস একটু শেয়ার করব, যে আমাদের মা বোনরা আমাদের হামরাসি ইস্ট লন্ডনে আমাদের কাউন্সিলে অনেকদিন মানে 2006-এ ইট ওয়াজ ওয়ান অফ দ্য ওয়ার্স্ট রিসাইক্লিং বারা ইন দ্য কান্ট্রি। আমরা একটা প্রোঅ্যাক্টিভ ক্যাম্পেইন শুরু করছিলাম যে আমরা মহিলাদের সাথে ক্যাম্পেইন মানে ওয়ার্ক করব, যে ওরাকে এনকারেজ করবো রিসাইক্লিং করার জন্য। And সব থেকে চমৎকার হলো যে এভরিবডি হুজ কাম ফ্রম দ্য ভিলেজ লাইফ জানেন যে ছোটবেলা থাকতে আমাদের গাঁও গ্রামে একটা লোক আসতো ওই যে লোয়া গ্লাস জিনিস নেওয়ার জন্য, সোমপাপড়ি কি সুইট জিনিস দিয়ে এক্সচেঞ্জ করতো। সো উই স্টার্টেড টকিং অ্যাবাউট দোজ থিংস, ইট ব্রট লট অফ মেমোরিজ ব্যাক। সো উই এনকারেজ উইমেন ইন আওয়ার বারা টু রিসাইকেল। আমাদের একটা ইনিশিয়েটিভ করছিলাম যে আমাদের যদি আপনারা সাহায্য করেন রিসাইক্লিং এ, আপনাদেরকে আমরা ফ্রি সুইমিং দিব প্রতি বৃহস্পতিবারে আমাদের লোকাল সুইমিং পুল। একটা অনেক সাকসেস ছিল। বাট গোয়িং ব্যাক টু ইউর কোয়েশ্চেন অ্যাবাউট ইনভেস্টমেন্ট, আমরা জানি আমাদের এই দেশে যারা ফার্স্ট জেনারেশন সেকেন্ড জেনারেশন যারা বহুত কষ্ট করে মেহনত করে টেইলারিং রেস্টুরেন্টে ব্যবসা করে যা করে দেশে অনেক ধন সম্পত্তি করছেন, এখনো করতেছেন। সো তৌহিদ ভাই যেটা বলছিল যে গ্রিন এনার্জি, আপনি যদি নাইস একটা বাসা বানান, you think about using material that are much better to the environment. You want to put air conditioning in every room. Is that necessary? Tarpore, why not invest in solar panel in your basha? That will also reduce electricity in terms of, by harnessing natural energy. So these are some of the things you could think about. So it doesn't mean that শুধু সরকারে তোমার এই জিনিস করতে হবে to save the world. আপনারা দায়িত্ব, আপনারা সবার ইন্ডিভিজুয়াল রেসপন্সিবিলিটি আছে যে আপনি কিছু কিছু ছোট ছোট জিনিস করলে ইট উইল হ্যাভ এ লং টার্ম এফেক্ট। যে একটু আগে বলছিলাম যে হ্যাঁ একটু দিন আমাদের লন্ডনে একটু দিন আগে যে পেট্রোল ক্রাইসিস ছিল, অবশ্যই সবাই হাঁটছে because there was a crisis, but that is going to be in a long term. So if we take that initiative now, যে আমরা লেস ড্রাইভ করব, yes I understand আমাদের বাঙালি ভাই অনেকজন বলে আব্দুল ভাই it is not easy, আমি বাসের চাউল বস্তা পেজের বস্তা নিয়ে আসতে পারবো না, কারণ I know, but where you can take public transport, where you can walk, do that. So these are some of the sort of practical measures we can do. তারপরে আমাদের ডায়েট, আমরা জানি সবাই আমরা মানে একটু গোশ খাইতে ভালো লাগে, একটু big lamb chops. What we're encouraging people to do is not just through environment, but also for health reasons. Red meat খাওয়া তো ডাক্তার বলে যে ডায়াবেটিস জন্য ভালো নয়, but we're now saying that consuming of red meat, it is also contributing to global warming. So these are some of the practical things. তারপরে আমাদের যারা ধর্মীয় মানে in terms of religious point of view, কথা আছে কোরআনে কথা আছে যে তোমার জিনিসটা ওয়েস্ট করার জন্য নিষেধ। Even if you live next to the river, do not misuse water. আমরা এখন বলতেছি যে this is already written in the Quran that we need to put into our life, into our practice. So every aspect of the environment, we are custodian in this world that Allah has given us. So we must look after the world. So we are now looking from Quran point of view, but also from a practical point of view, but also from a scientific point of view. Everything is possible. আমাদের 650,000 বাংলাদেশী আমরা এখন দেখছি যে এবার একটা আমাদের নতুন সংগ্রাম. This is a silent war against global warming. হ্যাঁ, বঙ্গবন্ধু যে ডাকছিলেন যে 7th of March 1971 for liberate Bangladesh, এখন আমরা ব্রিটিশ বাংলাদেশি এই যে আমরা change.org এ গিয়ে আমরা যে একটা পিটিশন করছি, একটা open letter to Sheikh Hasina, we are asking her to unite the Bangladeshi community again to save Bangladesh. সো আমি অনুরোধ করবো যারা আপনার বাসায় দেখতেছেন এখন চিন্তা করছেন আমি কি করতে পারি, আমরা ইন্ডিভিজুয়ালি অনেক জিনিস করতে পারি, আমাদের ইয়াং জেনারেশন, বিকজ অল দ্য এফর্ট, আপনি যদি এখন প্যারেন্টস, আপনি যদি দাদা দাদি তাকে বাসা দেখতেছেন এটা প্রোগ্রামটা, আপনার মেহনতে যে দেশের বাসা, আপনার বাবা, আপনি যদি একজন বাবা থাকেন, আপনার ছেলে সন্তানদের নিয়ে দেশে যাওয়ার একটা কল্পনা, একটা আশা আছে যে আপনার আত্মীয় স্বজন কবরস্থান মানে বাসা জমিন টমিন দেখাবার জন্য। But in 60 years, in 50 years, if Bangladesh doesn't exist, এই মেহনতটা কের জন্য, এই অত কষ্ট কেন? So we must act not just now, we should have done yesterday, but it's still not too late to do more to save Bangladesh and other nations like Bangladesh that are most at risk of global warming, climate change.
Thank you, Abdal. Jebi, I want to come to you. In terms of one of the key players in this equation is the industrialists or various industries across the world, again in Bangladesh as well. So how committed do you think that industries across the world to this change in terms of using renewable energy or kind of reducing the net carbon emission?
Yeah. You said earlier, should it just be the responsibility of national government? And I wanted to talk a little bit about my work, actually, because we work with businesses and also state and regional governments. So in the climate negotiations, they're called non-state actors because really the national government has sovereignty here. But there's a huge recognition that businesses and other forms of government have a huge role to play. So if I give you some examples from even my own work, we have various campaigns. So we have Renewable Energy 100, EV 100, we have energy efficiency. That's a huge way of saving some of the energy, talking about not wasting. We look at steel, we look at concrete. You talked earlier about building palaces. Cement has a huge carbon footprint. So looking at ways of doing these industries in more sustainable ways. And we've been, our NGO has been around for 15 years, and we have a lot of businesses that are hugely committed. There are people that are interested in how do we do this better in a more sustainable way. It's important for business too, because they need to think about the future. So it's no more the world where you can make a quick profit. A lot of businesses are thinking about long-term, multi-generational impacts and so forth. And many of them are here at COP. I'll meet with many of them, and I think Abdal gave some really good examples. We often talk about energy and transport, but food is a huge sector. 1/3 of greenhouse emissions is from our farming, our agriculture. The push there is to kind of move to a more plant-based diet, which is quite hard when you come from a culture like ours where fish and meat is very important. But, how do you try to incorporate some of that into your sort of week?
Jebi, if you can quickly kind of give your view on, because obviously in this country we are seeing low emission zones has already been introduced, so that's to some extent going to impact on bringing electric mobility into the equation. But what we see in Bangladesh is a majority of the vehicles don't have any fitness certificate, and the carbon emission from the trucks and the buses and cars are of significant concern. So how do you think Bangladesh should start addressing this issue as well as the recycling? Because Abdal gave a very important example of how recycling can also be a very important factor in terms of addressing this climate change. So would you be able to give us some ideas or observations in terms of how Bangladesh can actually start on those two issues?
Yeah, so Tauhid Bhai mentioned earlier about a bike ride that they did. Well, with one of our colleagues, Mazher Khan, we did a bike ride in Bangladesh about 10 years ago in 2010. So we cycled from Sylhet to Cox's Bazar. And there, as you say, Appa, you know, the priority is very much about the lorries on the road. You know, they're going from Dhaka to Chittagong with all the sort of materials and so forth. It's very much on kind of money. When you look at the roads in Dhaka, there's no walking space. The cities are not designed with people in mind. Now, when I was living in Dhaka a couple of years ago, there was a lovely summit that started that was about dreaming about your vision of a Dhaka. And I work with countries around the world, and other countries are better at doing this, sort of engaging their citizens to say, what is your vision of your city, of your world? And really trying to incorporate that into the design of the city. And I think we're still far behind with things like that in Bangladesh, but there are people that are thinking about that. And, you know, when I look at the updated Bangladesh NDC, which is the nationally determined contribution, which is essentially the plan that they submitted to the UNFCCC for this conference, it's thinking about electric vehicles and how to make the roads wider and, thinking about these situations. So it is there, it just comes back down to the money. How do we finance this?
Jebi will come back. Sorry to interrupt, we have to go for a short break. দর্শক ছোট্ট বিজ্ঞাপন বিরতির পর ফিরে আসছে, আমাদের সঙ্গে আলোচনায় থাকুন। বিজ্ঞাপন বিরতির পর আমরা ফিরে এসেছি আজকের আলাপচারিতার শেষ অংশে। আমরা কথা বলছি জলবায়ু পরিবর্তনের প্রভাব বা COP26 সামিট নিয়ে। আমাদের সঙ্গে রয়েছেন আবদাল উল্লাহ, আমাদের সঙ্গে রয়েছেন COP26 সামিট থেকে জেবি রহমান এবং স্টুডিওতে রয়েছেন তাওহিদ পাশা। আমরা পাশা ভাই আপনার কাছে আসতে চাচ্ছি। Obviously we have talked about number of challenges, we talked about number of difficulties that number of countries are facing, and we've heard about commitments from world leaders. What are the solutions? I mean, how do you want to see our world? I mean, Jebi was saying in her comments, the last comment, that actually it's very important to see what is exactly our vision of the world, what is our vision for our country. So how do we want to see the world?
In Bangladesh now, আমরা দেখতে পারতেছি যে আপনাদের অনেক মানুষ যে livelihoods they used to work on their farms, they're now moving to the cities. এর কারণ হচ্ছে যে তাদের ওই tending the farms is no longer sustainable.
গ্রামের জমি জমা তো ভেঙে যাচ্ছে।
জি, এটাই হচ্ছে problem.
নদীর ভাঙনে।
But this isn't necessarily bad news. Bangladesh now has one of the biggest growing megapolises in the world, Dhaka, but we don't just have to invest in Dhaka. Apnader Bangladesh's bhitor there are a number of other cities, from Chittagong to Sylhet to Mymensingh to Dinajpur. We should be investing in those cities. Ekhon people are moving there for their livelihoods, and as we've already said, green investment can actually make sense commercially. There was an interesting program last night on Coca-Cola. They want to recycle or manufacture plastic bottles from at least 20 to 30% of recycled goods. Kintu tara pacche na oi recycled material. Bangladeshe amra jodi infrastructure establish jodi korte pari, recycling infrastructure to collect those plastic bottles, then those will come out of the rivers, those will come out of the landfill sites, and
so
they
Bangladesh
can be
jodi kichu fund paয়, if Bangladesh gets some sort of fund from this, this global fund, or global pot of money that all these big countries should put aside, is Bangladesh getting anything?
Bangladesh itself is investing. It's got 2 climate change trust funds already, so it's already investing in its own infrastructure. But yes, this is a global responsibility, because apni jodi dekhen apnar sobche dhoni deshgulo, the UK, US, Germany, etc., they're the ones who are creating the most climate change, so they have to invest in fighting climate change, and part of that investment is investing in funds to help countries in Bangladesh, like Bangladesh, adapt to a new type of economy. So that's very, very important. Bangladesh also has it's a beautiful country. It has a tourism industry which can be very attractive. Apni jodi dekhen the Sundarbans, Cox's Bazar, Borishal, the biggest river delta in the world. If we treasure those, then we can invest in tourism and we can enjoy the benefits of that. So it's all about sustainability at the end of the day.
And awareness raising, because আমরা আপনি যেটা বললেন plastic kind of recycling plastic, but যেটা আমরা আবদাল ভাইও বললেন যে the concept of recycling, আমরা এখনো বাংলাদেশে, এবং এখন বাংলাদেশে আরো বেশি দেখতে পাই, কারণ বাংলাদেশে এখন usage of plastic bottles is more frequent. প্রাণ জুস বলেন কিংবা যে কোনো জুস, they are coming into plastic bottles, and people are, because those are within price range of general people are buying the juices, and they're literally leaving the plastic bottles everywhere.
Kintu amra jodi chinta kori, Bangladesh was a pioneer. They were one of the first countries in the world to ban plastic bags, for example, and replace them with jute bags, jute being the golden fiber of Bangladesh prior to plastic becoming such an important commodity. If we can revert back to that, then that would be much better. And Bangladesh has taken leading steps in these areas. And to tell the truth, Bangladesh can not only just invest in its own technologies, it can show the world as well how to take a lead role.
Pasha bhai, I think it would be really helpful for our viewers to know a little bit about Dr. Tasneem Siddique's work, because I understand she's one of the pioneers in terms of climate change.
Jebi has already mentioned Professor Salimul Haq. Dr. Tasneem Siddique, she's part of the COP delegation. She has done a lot of research as part of the Refugee Migratory Movements Unit. And unar researcher bhitore dekha jacche that people are migrating because of climate change. And so the world has to adapt to allow people to move. Secondly, Tasnim has said that we need to make the cities more sustainable. People are leaving their rural livelihoods and moving towards big cities like Dhaka. We need to start investing in those cities outside Dhaka to make their own livelihoods more sustainable. And she's one of the leading climate change experts in the world. So if the world is listening to our own experts from Bangladesh, then that does bode well for the future.
Thank you. Jebi, I would like to come to you in terms of number of targets were set in Paris summit last time, and I'm sure there will be also targets set for COP26 this time round, but how realistic are these targets?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think Paris...
Sorry, Jebi,
really
we can't hear you properly. I think that's fine.
Can you hear me now? Okay,
yeah.
good. Thanks. I think Paris really reflected a gear change in these international negotiations, because I mentioned we had about 20 odd years of this where it was very much kind of a clash between the developed countries and the developing countries. And Paris was different because it asked leaders to bring their commitments to the table. What are you capable of doing in your country? What's your baseline? How many emissions have you sort of emitted? You know, that sort of thing. Look at your different sectors. How can you reduce your emissions in these? So the world leaders came with these commitments to Paris, and you know, they do these UN emissions gap reports each year. And they found that if all the countries were to do everything that they said that they would do, you would still have a huge kind of gap. So our target is to reach between 1.5 degrees and 2 degrees. We would offshoot completely 3 degrees, 4 degrees. There was a very scary World Bank report on what a 4-degree world looked like, and we do not want to live in a 4-degree world. Now, what they said with Paris is that every 5 years, world leaders come with your increased ambitions. You cannot go behind, you can only go forward. And that's why Glasgow is really important. It's now 5 years since Paris, and world leaders have brought their sort of targets and commitments to the table. And again, we've got this emissions gap report, and it's telling us that if all of those commitments were achieved, we'll reach 2.7. So we're still overshooting, and we all know how challenging it is to actually implement these targets. So there's still a lot to be done, and that's why these negotiations are so important, and why these
Jebi, are you still with us?
I think she's frozen.
And she's frozen. We'll come back to Jebi. Abdal bhai, apnar kache ashte chaibo. Same question to you. How do we want to see our world? What exactly is our vision for the world? Amader dorshokder jonno apnar concluding remarks.
ধন্যবাদ আপনাকে। আমি প্রথম ভাগে যে বলছিলাম যে অবশ্যই আমরা এখন 50 বছর সেলিব্রেট করতেছি। আগামী 16th December আমাদের যে 26th of March we lit up London Eye. On the 16th of December we hope to light up more amazing venues across the world to celebrate 50 years the victory day of Bangladesh. But আমাদের যে একটা আশা ভরসা আমাদের বাচ্চা আমাদের প্রজন্ম next generation to feel a connection to the ancestral land and to feel the part of Bangladesh heritage. For that আমরা যতটুকু করতে পারি এখন, we must do more to save Bangladesh. Otherwise, what is it all for? So for that, আমি দেখতে চাই যে আমরা seriously climate change নিয়ে everybody individually আমরা climate change কে আমাদের action নেই। শুধু global scientists, শুধু Jebi and all the good people who are working day and night on climate change. ওরা দায়িত্ব না, এই রেসপন্সিবিলিটি আমাদের সবাই একটু অল্প জিনিস করে যদি, কারণ একটু আগে বলছিল জেবি যে বাংলাদেশ was one of the first countries in the world to ban ওই যে একটেকি ব্যাগ যেটা বলতো দোকানে বাজারে গেলে জুট ব্যাগ। আমরা এই সমানভাবে দেখছি এখন আমাদের লোকাল সুপারমার্কেটে গেলে যে আপনি এখন ব্যাগ পাইবেন না ফ্রি 10p অথবা 50p পর্যন্ত। তো তো এখন আমরা কি করতেছি, আমরা লোকালি যে জুট ব্যাগ, বাংলাদেশ ইজ ওয়ান অফ দ্য এক্সপোর্টার্স অফ জুট। আমি নিজে কইতে পারবো যে 10 বছর আগে যে আমাদের জামাল ভাই তাজ স্টোরে we took initiative to introduce 5,000 jute bag in entire hamlets. আমি নিজে এই jute bag for 10 years আমি ব্যবহার করতেছি। So this is the kind of things that everyday things we can do. আমরা এখন আমরা চিন্তা করছি যে আমি কেন দিব 10p per carrier bag। এখন আমাদের বাঙালির ছোট মোটো দোকানও আপনি এই ফ্রি ব্যাগ পাইবেন না।
একটু থামাচ্ছি আপনাকে। লেটস হিয়ার এ কমেন্ট ফ্রম আ ভিউয়ার। দর্শক কে রয়েছেন আমাদের সঙ্গে?
হ্যালো, আমার নাম মোখতার হোসেন খোকন। I'm calling from Leicester.
আসসালামু আলাইকুম। জি,
I agree with the gentleman. You know, it's a brilliant program, your topic you brought up tonight. And it's nice to see that. And what I'd like to say is, even though Bangladesh, we are one of the countries that's suffering from global warming. And we have to, I think the Bangladesh, the general public and the government will have to take some steps to, fight this global warming, even though we need some backing or financial backing from other countries. We agree with that. But we have to really, survival is more important than looking at somebody else to give us finance. I think it's up to the people, the public, to be educated properly in Bangladesh. What will happen if we don't do anything? Thank you.
Thank you, Mokhtar Bhai. I think that's a really, really useful comment, and thank you for watching and keep watching. Abdal Bhai, ফিরে যাচ্ছি আপনার কাছে। জি,
হ্যাঁ, ধন্যবাদ কলারকে। So as the caller said, we all have to do
আনমিউট
our
করতে
bit.
হবে আপনাকে।
I think
We can hear. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. So I think we all have to take a responsibility. আমরা সবাই যদি একটু ভাবে চিন্তা করি যে অথবা practically ছোট ছোট জিনিস করি, not only will it benefit financially our own pocket, because every time you go to the shop you don't want to spend 10p on a carrier bag, so getting a jute bag will last you many years, so that saves money. Eating less meat, walking longer will save money on petrol, using public transport. And these are small things that we can do that will have a lasting impact on Bangladesh and other countries. And on the big businesses, আপনারা যারা দেশে ইনভেস্টমেন্ট করার চিন্তা করছেন, আমি জানি যে বাংলাদেশ গভর্নমেন্ট ইজ ওপেনিং অল সোর্স অফ অ্যাভিনিউজ টু গ্রিন বিজনেস ইনিশিয়েটিভ ইন বাংলাদেশ। আমরা একটু যদি চিন্তা করি, যারা প্রমিনেন্ট ব্রিটিশ বাংলাদেশে যারা বিজনেসম্যান আছেন, আপনারা যদি একটু চিন্তা করেন যে কিভাবে আপনাদের নতুন বাসা, when you're building that, what sustainable materials you can use, solar powered energy, and all sorts of other things that you could do from adaptation and climate change. Everything will help. So don't think আপনি বাসা বসে বলে এটা আমরা কি করব, এটা তো আমেরিকা, China is polluting. No, we can all take responsibility. ছোট ছোট step will go a long way.
Absolutely. Small steps will go a long way. Jebi is back with us. Jebi, my question to you was how realistic, especially if we look at the goals that are going to be set from this COP26 2021, what sort of goals will be set for developing countries as well as developed countries?
You okay?
We can hear you.
Okay, great.
I think we have lost your camera, Jebi.
Try again. How is that?
I think her battery's gone.
Sorry.
Can you hear us?
They're saving energy in Glasgow. They've turned the light off in the studio.
Jebi, can you hear us?
Sorry, can you hear me now?
We can hear you. That's fine. I think we have lost you. You have lost your camera, but we can hear you. So that's fine. Go on.
Great. Yeah. So each of the countries they've kind of submitted their commitments in terms of what they can do, and it's really about reducing those emissions. I think what's really interesting is that adaptation has come up huge on the agenda now compared to before. It was very much about mitigation. So adaptation is really important. I think the tagline of the British government has been keeping 1.5 alive, and we've discussed earlier about how important it is to keep within that sort of that limit, and what huge impacts would have if we sort of increase that. And really, the huge thing here is the money. And if you look at something like the Bangladesh climate commitment, they have what they call conditional and unconditional sort of targets, if you like. So the sort of unconditional ones are what they can do with their own sort of budget, with their own capacity. But the conditional ones are where they're asking the global leaders for that 100 billion USD that was promised each year to developing countries from 2020, which we still haven't seen. And if countries like Bangladesh could receive that money, they can do so much more. I think we've discussed some of these ideas. Tauhid Bhai covered well things like the green technology. There's so much more we could do, but it really relies on that money being sort of channeled to these efforts.
So last time we remember, Bangladesh was really fighting hard to get this money, which is absolutely their right to have this fund, disaster fund, and we didn't see much of a kind of commitment from the world leaders, although they put commitments verbally, but it didn't materialize. And as you said, that this time round, if they don't get the money, if they don't get the fund, these conditional commitments. How do you see the future of Bangladesh addressing this issue?
Yeah, I think this is where, the collaboration is really important. So you see that within the climate change negotiations, you've got the Climate Vulnerable Forum. But I think, and what we're trying to do with this initiative is that collaboration has to come from all of society. And I think this letter is a really good step in that direction. We talked about what can individuals do. You can take your individual steps like walk instead of take your car, eat a plant-based diet, look at your fast fashion and try and reduce that and think about, being more sustainable in how you wear your clothes and so forth. But really, as we're in this global summit, one of the most important things you can do is keep lobbying your leaders. Really put a lot of pressure on those global leaders. I think the youth have done that really well. We've seen the Greta Thunberg sort of effect ever since Paris, and that has had a huge impact at how we look at this. We've seen a lot of people come out in protest. Even well-respected people in this field have become activists because they realized in order to get the attention of the world's leaders and media, you really need to speak up loud about this right now. Now is the moment.
Thank you, Jebi. Abdal Bhai, literally 1 minute or 30 seconds rather. Obviously, Bangladeshi community plays a vital role in terms of the economy of this country. So how can we actually put pressure as a Bangladeshi community towards the leaders of this country to ensure that this Bangladesh actually gets that fund from the developed countries, which they should actually commit to developing countries?
Thank you. I think we have, as Bangladeshi community, আমাদের প্রায় 10,000 restaurant আছে না? Every constituency in the country is the 650 MPs. They go to one restaurant, if not more, a week. আগামী রবিবারে যে BCA career board আছে, অনেক মিনিস্টার, অনেক এমপি আসবেন। আমার অনুরোধ থাকবো যারা বাংলাদেশি কমিউনিটি, যারা ব্রিটিশ বাংলাদেশি ব্যবসায়ী লোকেরা, আপনারা টেবিলে বসে যে এমপি আসবেন, ওরাকে আপনারা অনুরোধ করবেন, ওরাকে আপনারা চ্যালেঞ্জ করবেন, ওরা এনকারেজ করবেন that they take the climate change issue seriously and that they support Bangladesh in its endeavor to be a global leader in tackling climate change. Because ওই যে একটু আগে বলছিলাম না, আপনারা যা কষ্ট মেহনত করে বাংলাদেশে যা তৈরি করছেন, যা জমিন, যা বাসা, যা সম্পত্তি, in 50 years less it will be all underwater. So এই কষ্ট, এই যে মেহনত কোথায় যাবে? So let's use the BCA or the various other community events, যারা মিনিস্টার, এমপি যারা আসবেন, to put focus on climate change.
Thank you, Abdal Bhai. Thank you, Ullah. Thank you, Tauhid Pasha, and thank you, Jebi Rahman, for joining us from COP26. দর্শক বিদায় নিচ্ছি আজকের মতন। আগামী সোমবারের আলাপচারিতা দেখবার অনুরোধ রইল। শুভরাত্রি।